new and the people you want to know more about. The all-new Biography Channel. Step out of your life and into the lives of movie stars and moguls, from their most dramatic on-screen performances to the untold drama of their lives.
Every night, you could live another life.
Movies, biographies, and documentaries, 24 hours a day. The Biography Channel. Call your cable operator or satellite provider.
Have you ever dreamed of exploring another world? Could you witness something new? Push boundaries? Or reach for your greatest hope? The experience of every generation is yours. On the History Channel, where the past comes alive.
Hello, I'm Arthur Kent. Welcome to History Undercover. The nightmare of modern terror in the Middle East took a shocking and radical turn in 1972, more than 1,000 miles from the Holy Land. Radical Palestinians, unable to achieve their goals through war or diplomacy, massacred Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics. The assault was carried out on the world stage with nearly 1 billion people watching on television. What the world didn't see was the Israeli response. Our program reveals how Israel unleashed an elite team dedicated to revenge, whatever the cost. Join us as History Undercover presents Revenge. Nearly every day on television and in newspapers, we witness a blood feud between Israelis and Palestinians that has continued for decades. Two peoples with roots in the same land, locked in an ancient ritual of vengeance, an eye for an eye. It was the late 1960s when this cycle of violence began to escalate. After Israel soundly defeated the Arab coalition in the 1967 war, Palestinian militant groups turned to increasingly spectacular acts of terror to get world attention. Israel countered with increasingly forceful measures against them, but for both, 1972 would be a turning point. On May 5th of that year, a group of militant Palestinians hijacked Sabina Flight 571 and landed it in the heart of Israel, Lod Airport in Tel Aviv. The Sabina captain relayed the terrorists' demands that 317 Palestinians be released from Israeli prisons, or they would kill everyone on board.
The alternative is to leave here, otherwise I am quite sure the plane will be exploded.
Israel's policy was never to negotiate with terrorists and never to back down. Prime Minister Golda Meir ordered an assault on the aircraft led by future Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Disguised as mechanics, Barak and his team snuck up on the plane and stormed it.
But it took just 90 seconds before we stormed it, killed 2 of the terrorists and captured the others.
As relieved passengers celebrated the successful raid, Israelis questioned the captured terrorists. They admitted they were members of a new Palestinian militant group with shadowy links to the Palestine Liberation Organization called Black September. The man who'd ordered the hijacking, they said, was one of its leaders, Ali Hassan Salameh. Only 2 weeks later, his name came up again in connection with a bloody massacre that left 24 dead, 78 wounded at the same airport. And Israel had not heard the last of Salameh or Black September.
After that, they realized they can't hijack Israeli planes. If they go to Israel with somebody else's plane and try to extort something there, they'll be killed. So they figured they'd go somewhere else.
Somewhere, the whole world would be watching the 1972 Munich Olympics.
Many of the crowd on their feet here in the Sporthalle in Munich. The Olympics have really come to life.
These Olympic Games, which opened on August 26, were billed by their German hosts as a showcase for international peace and cooperation, a place where politics could be set aside and individual athletes could mingle freely. This seemed like a good idea to the 27-year-old fencing coach on the Israeli team, Andrei Spitzer. He even stopped to talk to some Arab athletes on the Lebanese delegation. His wife Anki thought he was being naive.
I said, are you out of your mind? You know, these are the Lebanese, you know, it's dangerous. And he said, no, Anki, this is not dangerous. This is what the Olympics are all about. That's why I'm here. This I can do here. Here there are no borders. We have no enemies here.
That's what Spitzer thought when he made what would be his last call to his wife from a payphone in the Olympic Village. It was September 4th, 1972.
And we talked very quickly, and he said, 20 more Fennig, 10 more Fennig, and I love you, and that was it. And I did not realize then that these were the last words that I would ever hear from him.
That night, 8 Palestinians in tracksuits and ski masks broke into the quarters of the Israeli athletes, carrying AK-47s in their gym bags.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, my parents came to my room and they said to me, well, you should know that we just heard on the radio that Arab terrorists, or Palestinians, they didn't know there were Palestinians, Arab terrorists just came into the village and they are keeping a number of Israelis hostage.
If I were to guess at the moment at which of the commando organizations this group is to come from, I'd be most likely to narrow in on a group called Black September.
I was a reporter based in Lebanon, and if you were an American reporter working for an American news agency in Beirut, you knew all the characters because the Palestinians were very open about what they were, about many of the things they were trying to accomplish, and so we knew some of the players. Didn't always know what they were doing, and God knows what they were going to do.
It was Black September, and they had taken 11 members of the Israeli team hostage. By the time police arrived on the scene, they had already murdered one of them, boxing coach Moshe Weinberg. They threw his body out the front door. Then they issued their demands.
The terrorists demanded the release of 234 prisoners who were being held in Israeli jails, and also some who were being held abroad. But Golda Meir would have none of it. She just rejected their demands outright.
Instead, Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir sent 2 officials to Germany, one of them the head of Israeli intelligence, Mossad. His name was Zvi Zamir. He intended to help the Germans deal with the volatile situation at the Olympic Village.
We were the first to suffer from terrorism, and as a result of that, we were the first to train units to deal with terrorism, you see.
Germany, although it had no anti-terrorism units, wouldn't accept any Israeli assistance. Instead, local government officials tried stalling the Black September gunmen until they could come up with a way out. They kept the kidnappers dangling by telling them Israel was considering their demands.
Every couple of hours, the Palestinian terrorists, they set an ultimatum. And then the ultimatum would be postponed till 3 o'clock. And then it would be postponed till 5 o'clock. So it was like dying every time a little bit, you know, because I'm feeling that maybe now it's going to happen.
By 5 p.m., the Palestinians demanded an airplane to take them and their remaining hostages to an unspecified Arab country. The Germans agreed, counting on ambushing the terrorists at the airfield.
There was an assumption among all of us when the Germans said, we shall deal with it, that they are capable of doing it.
German authorities transported the terrorists and their hostages to the Fürstenfeldbruck airfield, but only 9 Israelis made the trip. The terrorists had killed another Israeli athlete in the room.
I quite frankly thought at the beginning they'd work it out somehow. Palestinians would get out of the country and the Israelis would be released. But when they took off, first in the buses underground and then the helicopters that night going to Fürstenfeldbruck, I don't think any of us thought it was going to end the way it did. or that the Germans were as ill-prepared as they turned out to be.
At the airfield, German police had set up a decoy airplane to lure the terrorists into the line of their sniper fire. But the Palestinians immediately realized it was a trap.
And it all went horribly wrong. It degenerated into a battle, and the hostages were in the middle of this. They were manacled and shackled in the back of the helicopters. And all this time, the two Israelis who'd come over to try and help the rescue operation were standing there watching this, and impotent really. They were powerless to do anything because the battle had begun.
In a chaotic gunfight, German snipers took out 5 of the terrorists. Zamir, who had arrived in Munich just a few hours before, watched helplessly as the Palestinian gunmen, before they went down, murdered the Israeli athletes shackled in the helicopters.
They either threw a hand grenade or fire to the helicopters, and fire started in the helicopters. And immediately they called in 2 fire brigade trucks to put off the fire, but it was too late.
24 hours after the ordeal had begun, all the Israeli hostages, 5 of the 8 terrorists, and 1 German policeman were dead. 3 surviving terrorists were in police custody.
There were 11 hostages. 2 were killed in their rooms. 9 were killed at the airport tonight. They're all gone.
It was stunning, just stunning, and very hard to believe.
On the afternoon of September 6th, the murdered athletes were honored in a memorial service in the Olympic Stadium.
Every civilized person recoils in horror.
Afterward, Ankie Spitzer, who'd come to Munich to claim her husband's body, insisted on going to the room where her husband had been held.
I just looked there and I said to myself, if this is where André spent his last 21 hours, you know, a guy who really loved life and who loved the Olympics and the idea behind the Olympics. If this is what they did to him, if he had to sit here 21 hours looking at one of his teammates being tortured, I said somebody is going to pay for it.
Golda Meir's government was going to make sure a lot of people paid for it. And in avenging Munich, Israel would adopt the ways of its enemies. It would go beyond its borders to neutral countries, bringing terror to the terrorists. The murder of 11 Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics had taken Middle East violence to a new level. As the relatives of the Munich victims gathered to bury their dead, the government of Israel plotted revenge.
I think it was a great shock. It was a great shock because it showed you what kind of lack of inhibition, lack of any moral constraints this terror had. If it was supposed to break our morale, it didn't.
In Jerusalem, Prime Minister Golda Meir told Parliament that the Israelis would go after the terrorists responsible and said, "We will smite them wherever they may be."
And she called all the families together. We had 7 widows and 14 orphans. And she promised us that anyone who was connected to this terror attack would be hunted down and would be brought to justice.
At first, this justice looked like previous skirmishes, but on a much larger scale. 3 days after the Munich attacks, the Israeli Air Force launched simultaneous airstrikes on at least 10 PLO bases in Syria and Lebanon. 8 days later, Israeli forces destroyed more than 130 houses in Lebanon owned by families suspected of harboring Palestinian militants. Hundreds of civilians were killed. But this military response didn't seem enough.
Israel wanted a more targeted approach this time because the attack at Munich was seen as such an atrocity by the Israeli people and by the Israeli government that they decided eventually to form an assassination squad which would hunt down and assassinate leading members of the group which was responsible for the attack, and also other leading members within the PLO.
In the weeks following Munich, Golda Meir's advisors on terrorism gathered to devise another plan for revenge: targeted assassinations. General Aaron Yariv, who died in 1994, was a member of the group, which became known as Committee X.
My carefully considered advice was to go for the leaders of the Black September. I mean, eliminate the leaders of Black September as much as possible, or as many as possible.
Kill them.
To be honest, yes.
This was actually not a typical response, not a typical Israeli response to terrorism, because hitherto the Israeli response to terrorism was to go after the regime that harbored the terrorists. In Lebanon, there was no government, so to speak. So Israel didn't have, at the time, an address of a regime. As a result, it tried to get the terrorists themselves.
6 weeks after the Munich Olympics, Meir was persuaded by her advisors on Committee X to authorize the assassination campaign. They called it Operation Wrath of God. If she had any lingering doubts, they were erased by events on Sunday, October 29th. On that day, a Lufthansa Boeing 727 was hijacked by 2 Palestinians en route from Damascus to Frankfurt. The hijackers demanded and got the immediate release of the 3 surviving Munich terrorists in prison in Germany. The 3 terrorists celebrated their freedom with a press conference.
The Israeli kills the Arabs in Egypt, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria.
We understand now that the Germans did a deal with the Palestinians whereby Palestinians hijacked a Lufthansa jet and held the passengers hostage on the understanding and on the condition that the remaining 3 terrorists who'd been involved in the Munich attack would be released.
The Israelis were outraged. It was clear to them that if those who planned and carried out the attack at Munich were ever going to pay for what they did, only Israel could extract that payment. Operation Wrath of God would be the instrument of its revenge.
That was the first time, I think, in the history of Israel, and maybe in the history of the world, that a state decided to pursue a policy of personal killing in a systematic way.
Of course, launching an assassination campaign is completely illegal under international law. I mean, there was nothing really to justify it in that sense, but Israel was a young country. Many of the leading members of the government had been involved in groups that we now describe as being terrorist. So they had this sort of guerrilla warfare mentality, and they applied that to the formation of Operation Wrath of God, as it became known.
Committee X drafted a secret hit list of Black September leaders. It's still not known precisely how many names were on that list. Some reports say as many as 20.
And the committee was headed by the Prime Minister Golda Meir, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, and Foreign Minister Yigal Allon. And the committee acted basically as a tribunal, as a judiciary tribunal, like a court.
The Israeli intelligence agency Mossad supplied the committee with dossiers on the members of Black September. Number 1 on the list was Ali Hassan Salameh.
He was really a protege of Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat publicly declared him to be his son, in inverted commas, and he was really something of an aristocratic hero among the Palestinian people.
To Mossad, Salameh was the operations chief of Black September and the mastermind behind Munich. He was also the man behind the May 1972 Sabina hijacking and a massacre at Tel Aviv's Lod airport that same month. For all his bloody activities, Mossad dubbed him the Red Prince. Now Mossad had a message for him and the other members of Black September.
That if you kill us, if you dare attacking Israelis, we will go after you even to the end of the world. We will find you. You may find a shelter, you may escape, but eventually the long arm of Israel will get you.
Within weeks of Munich, Operation Wrath of God was underway. Agents of Israel's revenge fanned out across Europe and the Middle East. Their first victims would be targets of opportunity. wherever they could be found. Avenging Munich began in mid-October 1972 in Rome, 6 weeks after 11 Israeli athletes were killed at the Olympics. The first target the secret assassination squad could locate was a man they believed to be the Black September operative in Rome, who may have helped set up the Munich attack. His name was Weil Zweiter, and he worked as a translator at the Libyan embassy.
He had no idea the Israelis were coming for him. He ate dinner that night with a friend and walked home to his apartment block. He stopped off to buy some groceries, made a couple of phone calls, and then walked into the entrance hall where he lived when 2 Israeli agents emerged from shadows and shot him with small caliber pistols.
Over the next 6 months, agents of Mossad hunted down and killed 3 other Palestinians in European cities, all of whom Mossad believed had been either directly or indirectly involved in the Black September attack on Munich.
Part of the brief that was given to the leaders of the assassination campaign was that they had to turn the terror on the terrorists. They came up with quite intricate, sophisticated ways of killing people, including bombs that were detonated by telephone calls. They put landmines under somebody's car seat. They blew people up in their hotel bed.
The PLO at that time urged all who have relationship to the PLO and their officers to be on the alert because they're expecting that Israel would carry such terrorist operations.
Although Israel was suspected of being behind these assassinations, there was no evidence. However, someone would make certain that the widows of the athletes knew what was going on.
I would get a phone call, and I had no idea who it was, and they would say, listen to the news at 10 o'clock. Why? Because, you know, and then I would turn on the radio, listen to the news, and then I would hear, you know, that this guy or this person who was connected to the Munich massacre, you know, was being eliminated, liquidated, assassinated, whatever you want to call it. And I would take it as a fact.
By spring 1973, Israel planned a mission that would strike fear in the heart of Black September and the PLO, Beirut.
At the time, of course, Beirut wasn't like Europe. It was an armed city where they would have been quite prepared to attack and kill any Israeli soldiers that they saw.
But these soldiers would not be seen. The gunmen on the other hits had been Mossad agents, but for this operation, Mossad would enlist an elite Israeli special force known simply as the Unit. Ehud Barak was in charge.
We felt very self-confident that we can do whatever we want or whatever we need to do.
There's the scalpel and there's the sledgehammer. The sledgehammers, the cruise missiles, and the Air Force coming in and laying down carpet of bombs. The unit is a scalpel.
And this operation was definitely a surgical strike. Mossad learned that 3 important targets lived in the same apartment block on the Rue Verdun. These weren't the young men that had killed the Israelis at Munich, but the men who had issued their orders.
They were the minds behind the operation. These people were senior operatives of the PLO and the Black September. They were the planners, they were the military commanders, and they were very, very close to Yasser Arafat.
They were Black September's Kamel Adwan, PLO spokesman Kamal Nasser, and most importantly, Black September chief strategist Youssef Najjar.
Ehud Barak turned up at the commando's base and slapped down on the table the 3 photographs of the individuals they were going to target. And people who were there have said this murmur of anticipation ran through the room.
I told him, these are the guys. Try to photograph their faces. We are going to go and find them.
As the unit trained to go out and find them, they realized that a gang of young men moving through the streets of Beirut might look threatening. they decided to disguise themselves as couples on a date. Barak was a brunette.
So I was disguised as a young lady with long kind of widening trousers and elegant jacket, but with brunette hair and everything in place.
The idea is show the people something very unthreatening, they won't even notice it, and you can walk right by even a police officer, as they did in this case.
In the early hours of April 10, 1973, the unit anchored their speedboats off the coast of Lebanon and rode Zodiac inflatables ashore.
They were met by waiting cars with Mossad agents behind the wheel, and then they drove them through Beirut, through the city, through traffic. Agents from the Mossad had found out where they lived and had even gotten blueprints of the houses, the apartments where they were living, right outside of Beirut.
Now the original planning that we had is that everyone will reach the door of the apartment, will put on it certain special explosive charge that we shaped to uproot the door, and I will count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and everyone will explode together, and we will enter simultaneously.
At 1:42 in the morning, 3 Israeli teams were ready at the doors of the 3 apartments.
We heard an explosion. The Israeli commandos blew off the front door of our apartment. Within a few seconds, there was between 10 to 12 commandos in our apartment. They were shooting all over the place, at the walls, at the doors, bathroom doors, bedroom doors.
When gunmen burst into their bedroom, Yusuf Najjar's wife threw her body in front of her husband's.
I still hear very vividly my father said, "You have killed her," referring to my mother. "You've killed her, you dogs." Then he fell maybe 30 to 40 seconds after my mother. He fell to the ground.
Within minutes, all 3 targets were dead. The hit teams ran into the street and into a firefight with Lebanese police.
It was a very dramatic scene because you had these Israeli commandos who were dressed in women's clothing with blonde wigs and so on, and in wearing dresses, were firing with submachine guns at these police officers.
While Barak's team sped back to the rendezvous point, other Israeli teams were creating diversions elsewhere in Beirut. One blew up the headquarters of the Popular Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Other backup teams made sure no one followed them.
It took us the whole operation from the time we landed to the time we were back in the sea, some 30 minutes.
By the time the sun rose over Beirut, Barak and his men were already back in Israel. In their wake, they left devastation.
The Israelis assassinated 3 Palestinian leaders who all lived in this one apartment building. Altogether, they killed or injured as many as 40 Lebanese and Palestinians.
I remember the town was in shock when they invaded Beirut itself, and in the dead of night just stitched these guys in their apartments. The sense of vulnerability was enormous, that the Israelis could do what they wanted.
If the terrorists can come to Bangkok and to Cyprus, to Paris and to Rome, there is no reason to believe that we are not able to come to any place in the world.
It was now clear to the world that Israel was on a path of vengeance. What wasn't known, of course, was who would be the next target. In the years since the Munich Olympic massacre, Israel's Operation Wrath of God had taken out at least 9 targets on Golda Meir's hit list. None of them the 3 terrorists who had survived Munich. Yet, Mossad was after bigger game, Palestinian leaders who they believed were directly or indirectly involved in planning Munich, especially those who might plan and execute another attack.
In those days, Mossad was admired for its ability to get the job done, and they made sure they did the right thing, which was another thing that people respected them for, that they rarely, if ever, made mistakes. because they were careful.
Yet the most important target of the Israeli hit teams, and the most elusive, was still at large. Ali Hassan Salameh, also known as the Red Prince. He was the man Israeli intelligence believed to be the architect of Munich.
The Israelis were so keen to assassinate Ali Hassan Salameh that they searched all over Europe for him. They weren't sure where he was based or even really sure what he looked like at the time.
He was very cautious and careful and moved from one place to another, never stayed at the same place. He was a very, very difficult target.
Mossad agents would pick up traces of Salameh throughout Europe, but then the leads would run cold. But on July 14, 1973, Mossad got a tip that a low-level PLO courier who had been traveling through Scandinavia had a scheduled rendezvous with the Red Prince. Agents followed the courier to a tiny town in Norway named Lillehammer, 110 miles north of Oslo. 5 days after Mossad received the information, 14 members of an Israeli hit team converged on the tiny village.
The Israeli agents had false identities, false papers, they had cars, safe houses, and of course they had 2 assassins who were to actually conduct the operation.
After scouring the town, Israeli agents spotted the courier in a tiny cafe. When another Arab man joined him, agents compared his face to a grainy photo of Salameh. He was their man. For 2 days, they did not let the Red Prince out of their sight.
At one point they even followed him into the swimming baths, and somebody climbed into the water to swim close to him and thought they overheard him speaking in French, which he was thought to have spoken, and then thus decided that he was their target.
There was, however, a junior member of the Israeli team who had her doubts. Marianne Gladnikov did not think the man she was following all over this tiny town was the one in the photo. She was overruled.
The people in charge of the operation, including Tzvi Zamir, the head of the Mossad, because they were so anxious to kill Ali Hassan Salameh, they said, no, you are wrong, we are right, and they gave the orders, and the assassination team moved in.
On the night of the 21st, agents trailed their target and his female companion. After they went to a movie, they boarded a bus heading for the outskirts of town. At the Furubakken gate stop, the couple got off and made their way up the deserted street. Here's where the agents made their move. At 10:35 p.m., the agents fired 14 shots at close range. The woman screamed as the mastermind of Munich fell to the ground. Salameh was dead. The agents who made the hit were exhilarated as they left the scene, but junior members of their backup team made a fatal error. As they sped out of town, a lone Lillehammer policeman took down the license plate number of their car. The morning after the murder, they drove the same car to the Oslo airport. There, Norwegian police arrested them after the license plate number was broadcast over the radio in connection with the murder.
Their escape route should have been perfect. And it would go as an unexplained murder. But that didn't happen.
The 2 agents led police to 2 Mossad safe houses in Oslo, where 4 more agents were arrested. One of the agents was Dan Erbel, who turned out to have serious claustrophobia.
The Norwegian police did not know it. They did not know it. They simply put him in an underground cell. And once he was in the cell, he told the police officers, please take me out of it. I cannot stand it.
He started offering to talk when he was given the chance of a larger cell. So he started spilling the beans on this Israeli operation.
Erbel not only confessed to being an agent of Mossad, but under questioning confirmed what European police had long suspected, the existence of Operation Wrath of God.
And it led to the discovery of several Israeli safe houses across Europe, And really it led to massive international embarrassment for Israel as a whole.
Protests against Israel's policy broke out all over Europe. As bad as this was, the team had made a bigger mistake. The man they left dying by the side of the road was not Ali Hassan Salameh. It was Ahmed Bouchiki, a Moroccan waiter who lived in this modest apartment building, rode his bicycle to work, and was killed coming home from a movie with his pregnant wife, Turil.
If I remember correctly, there was some disagreement within the operational team as to whether they had the right guy. And when you have a team that is that expert and that skilled and that well trained, when there is disagreement from one of those expert, well-trained people, history has shown us you ought to listen.
In the aftermath of Lillehammer, 5 of the 6 Israeli agents were convicted and imprisoned. None served more than 21 months. To many, this was evidence that European governments quietly condoned the actions of the Israeli hit teams. Israel did not express regret about the Bouchiki murder until 1996. And although payments were made to Bouchiki's wife and son, Israel would never officially admit having committed this murder. Yet the mistake would leave Mossad reeling. In Lillehammer, Golda Meir's worst fears had been realized.
The murder in Lillehammer was seen as such a disaster for Israeli intelligence that Golda Meir and the Israeli government decided to suspend Operation Wrath of God and put a hold on future assassination operations.
Mossad hit teams would lie dormant for 5 years. But Munich and the Red Prince would not be forgotten. In 1974, when Yasser Arafat was invited to address the United Nations General Assembly, Israel was stunned. It was only 2 years after the Munich massacre. And standing right behind Arafat, also basking in the international spotlight, was the man Israeli intelligence considered the architect of Munich, Ali Hassan Salameh.
Even after the debacle at Lillehammer, Israeli intelligence officials didn't forget Ali Hassan Salameh.
He was one of the accounts that hadn't been closed, one of the Munich accounts that hadn't been closed and had to be closed before Munich could be put to bed.
By the mid-1970s, Salameh was hiding in war-torn Beirut. And at the same time Mossad was hunting him down, the CIA was courting him. Sam Wyman was Salameh's CIA contact in Beirut and was aware of Salameh's connection with Munich.
Some people will say that Ali Hassan was the principal planner. I don't know. I think he was probably the more operational planner, if you will. But that's what I knew, and it was an accepted thing. I mean, within intelligence circles, we knew it. But we never talked about it. He knew, I knew. I knew, he knew, I knew. It was understood between us that he was a marked man.
In 1978, 5 years after Operation Wrath of God was suspended due to the botched operation in Norway, Mossad finally zeroed in on Salameh in Beirut. To get him, the hit teams would go active once more. Salameh now had 2 sons and 2 wives in Beirut, the second a former Miss Universe. When he wasn't doing his duties as a family man, Salameh was working at the headquarters of the militant wing of the PLO, Fatah.
He had lowered his guard. He was following a pretty regular daily routine. The Israeli agents soon realized from surveillance where he was living and where he would work and people he would visit.
Every afternoon at the same time, Salameh and his bodyguards left his apartment building in a beat-up Chevy station wagon and took the same route to the Fatah office.
He relaxed, and he shouldn't have. I mean, how long do you keep that up? I mean, he didn't get a facelift, or face change, he didn't cut his hair off or anything else like that. He didn't change himself, which one would do if one was going to go completely to ground.
In November 1978, a woman with an English accent moved into the top floor of this Beirut apartment building. Surrounded by cats, she spent her days on this terrace painting street scenes, or so the neighbors thought.
But it also gave her the opportunity to monitor the streets and look for Ali Hassan Salameh's car and his bodyguards as they traveled through the city.
One afternoon in January 1979, as the woman watched the street below, Salameh's car passed a parked VW Bug that Israeli agents had packed with 100 pounds of explosives. When the smoke cleared, the car lay destroyed in the middle of the street. Inside, 38-year-old Ali Hassan Salameh, the man who the Israelis considered responsible for Munich, was fatally wounded, a shard of metal in his brain. The bomb had been set off by the woman on the balcony, a Mossad agent who disappeared soon after.
Well, Salameh was seen as almost an aristocrat within the Palestinian community. He was revered by many people, idolized by many others, and his death came as a huge shock to Palestinians. He had a huge funeral. Yasser Arafat shed tears and hugged Ali Hassan Salameh's young son, and really was visibly moved and deeply upset by the attack, and I think it's still something he's probably upset about to this day. The Israelis, by contrast, of course, were completely delighted about his death and celebrated the fact that they'd finally managed to kill him.
It was 7 years in the making, but Israel felt it had finally avenged Munich and its 11 slain athletes. They had taken out 10 prominent Palestinians who were believed to be directly or indirectly responsible for the Munich attack, including the Red Prince. 2 of the 3 terrorists who survived Munich were also reported killed in the late 70s, one while hiding in Lebanon, the other in an unnamed Gulf state.
There's only one surviving terrorist who was involved in the actual attack at Munich. That's a man called Jamal al-Ghashi, who still lives in hiding now. He still lives in fear of his life and thinks the Israelis may try to assassinate him.
Munich may be avenged, but the targeted killings have continued on both sides.
The Mossad has never stopped and ceased its operations against Palestinian terrorists.
Israeli officials have not been shy about saying that they now consider assassination a legitimate tool of national security.
The immediate and direct result was more determination to resist the Israelis.
The toll here so far, 10 Israelis dead, more than 200 injured.
What defines terrorism is the deliberate and systematic attack on innocent people, on civilians, on children, on babies. What defines a legitimate military action is to go after the terrorists themselves.
I think the legacy of Munich for the Palestinians is that they were forever identified as being terrorists or perpetrators of terrorist attacks. And this is really something that dogs their image in the world to this day.
There is simply no doubt that Munich took the whole confrontation between the Israelis and the Palestinians up another notch, and it's gone up, it seems to me, a notch every year since, to here we are at the beginning of the new century, and the Israelis and the Palestinians are calculatingly killing each other's identifiable characters on the streets of the Palestinian territories and Israel itself.
In 1999, a film crew accomplished something that even the Mossad was unable to do. They located the only surviving Munich terrorist, Jamal al-Ghashi, and convinced him to sit down for an interview. The Palestinian expressed pride in what he and his accomplices did at Munich. Al-Ghashi is reportedly hiding somewhere in Africa. For the History Channel, I'm Arthur Kent. Thanks for watching.